They stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes empty, as if we hadn't shared birthdays, summers, laughter, and loss. And then she said it. "You're not family anymore." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Something inside me just stopped. It had only been 5 months since my wife died. 5 months of silence, of cold sheets and her toothbrush still sitting by the sink. 5 months of trying to remember how to breathe without her in the room. Her family, the people who once called me brother, son, uncle, were now just strangers standing in my home, speaking those words like they weren't tearing my world apart all over again. They didn't come to check on me. They didn't ask how I was holding up. They came for the lake house. The house she and I had built dreams in. The place where we danced barefoot on the porch under summer rain, where her laughter echoed off the water, where every room held a piece of us. And yet there they stood. Not to reminisce, not to mourn with me, but to make it clear. Now that she was gone, so was my place in their family. I'd lost the love of my life. And now, I was losing the only people I still had left. That day, I realized something: death doesn't just take people. It uncovers truths. It peels back polite masks. It changes definitions of forever. And when they turned their backs on me, they didn't just lose me. They lost every memory we made together. So I made a decision, one I never thought I'd have the strength to make. I sold the lake house they loved. Not out of spite, but because sometimes, the only way to heal is to let go of the place where it all broke. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember that clearly because I was late for a meeting I didn't want to be in. I'd spilled coffee on my shirt, my phone was dying, and I was debating whether or not to just call the whole day a loss. And then I saw her. She was sitting at a cafe table outside, flipping through a paperback novel with a cup of tea in front of her. Not coffee, tea. Who drinks tea on a hot Thursday in July? She did. And somehow, it suited her. Her name was Elise. I asked if I could sit for a minute, just to borrow her phone charger. She smiled, slid it across the table without a word, and went right back to her book. That moment, that quiet confidence, it stopped me in my tracks. We talked for hours that day. About nothing and everything. About music, and road trips, and how both of us hated small talk but loved deep, meandering conversations. She made me feel like I'd known her my entire life, even though I didn't even know her last name yet. Our first date happened 3 days later. She showed up in sneakers and no makeup. "I don't do performances," she said. "You get the real me or nothing at all." And I loved that. God, I loved that. Elise had this way of making the world feel less chaotic. She was calm where I was restless. Patient where I was impulsive. She never raised her voice, not because she didn't feel deeply, but because she never needed volume to be heard. She had this laugh. Full and unfiltered. The kind of laugh that made other people laugh just hearing it. I started chasing that sound like a compass. Wherever that laugh was, that's where home was. She told me once, "You're safe with me." And she meant it. I never had to be anyone else around her. No pretending. No performance. Just me. And somehow, that was enough. We married a year later. Quiet ceremony, just us and a few friends. No grand gestures, no fancy decorations. Just vows spoken through teary smiles and hands held tight. And from that day forward, every single thing in my life had her in it. She was more than my wife. She was my peace. My anchor. My beginning, and for a while, I thought she'd be my forever. It wasn't a mansion. Not even close. The floor creaked when you walked down the hallway, and the screen door always slammed no matter how gently you tried to close it. But to us, it was heaven. We found it by accident. Elise had taken a wrong turn on our way back from visiting her parents, and just as I was grumbling about wasting gas, she gasped and said, "Stop the car." There it was, tucked behind tall pines, just feet from the water's edge. A weathered little cabin with green shutters and a wraparound porch. The for sale sign was barely hanging on, like it had given up waiting. We walked around it in silence. Elise touched the railing, peeked through the dusty windows, and then looked at me with that spark in her eyes. "This is it," she said. "This is where our summers will happen." I laughed at first. We weren't looking to buy anything. But she wasn't joking. A month later, it was ours. The lake house became our sanctuary. Every summer weekend, every holiday escape, every time the city felt too loud or life too fast, we packed a bag, grabbed groceries, and drove out to the lake. No cell signal. No emails. Just us, the water, the wind through the trees. We painted the walls together. She picked ridiculous colors that somehow worked. We built a little fire pit in the backyard where we burned marshmallows and told stories we told 100 times before. We made pancakes in our pajamas and danced barefoot to old records while coffee brewed. And then the family started coming. Her parents, her siblings, her nieces and nephews. The lake house became a second home for all of them: birthdays, anniversaries, spontaneous weekend visits. Laughter echoed through every room. Wet swimsuits hung on the railings. Someone was always making something in the kitchen. I didn't mind. I loved it. Because she loved it. That house wasn't just ours anymore, it belonged to the memories we were building with the people we loved. And Elise. She was at the center of all of it. She'd sit on the dock at sunset, legs dangling over the edge, wine glass in hand, and whisper, "I want to grow old here with you." And I believed her. More than that, I needed to believe her. Because that little house on the lake? It wasn't just wooden windows. It was us. Our story. Our beginning and end, written in sunrises and porch lights and long, lazy afternoons. When you marry someone, you don't just marry them, you marry their people. And Elise's people. They became mine. From the very beginning, her family wrapped me in warmth. Her mother would send me homemade pies just because, and her father, a quiet, stern man, once pulled me aside and said, "You're good for her. That's all that matters to me." I still remember the first Christmas I spent with them. Elise's brother Tim gave me a pair of ridiculous reindeer pajamas as a joke, and I wore them all day. By nightfall, I was sitting by the fire, surrounded by people who had become more than in-laws. They felt like home. Over time, those bonds deepened. I was there when her sister gave birth. I helped her younger brother move into his first apartment. I drove her father to medical appointments when he couldn't get there alone. I wasn't just Elise's husband. I was a part of the foundation of their family. And at the lake house, those relationships flourished. Every summer became a reunion. There were cookouts, canoe races, late-night card games where laughter shook the walls. I was Uncle Jake to the nieces and nephews, the one who told ghost stories by the fire and made the best grilled cheese sandwiches. The kids would run to me with scraped knees and big hugs, never thinking twice about where I fit in. Elise and I used to lie in bed at night after everyone had gone to sleep, and she'd whisper, "I love how they love you." And I love them too. Deeply. I wasn't trying to take anyone's place. I didn't want a medal. I just wanted to belong. And they made me feel like I did. It's funny, looking back now, how natural it felt. How unshakable. Because when people let you into their lives that fully, when you laugh at their tables and cry at their funerals and hold their babies, you start to believe that nothing could ever make you a stranger again. You start to believe that family isn't just about blood. It's about time. Loyalty. Showing up. And I showed up. Every time. That's why what came later hurt more than words can explain. Because when a bond feels unbreakable, its fracture feels like betrayal. It started with a cough. Nothing dramatic. Just a dry little thing Elise brushed off like it was seasonal. But then came the fatigue. The weight loss. The way she started forgetting simple things, like where she left her keys or whether she'd eaten lunch. I chalked it up to stress. Work had been busy. Life had been non-stop. We both agreed to slow down. Still, something wasn't right. One night, I found her standing in the hallway, staring at a family photo on the wall. She looked at it like she didn't recognize the faces, including her own. That was the moment I knew. The next morning, we went to the doctor. Tests were ordered. More tests followed. And then came the appointment neither of us wanted to attend. I remember the sterile white walls of the office. The way the doctor avoided eye contact. The soft tone in her voice, like she was breaking bad news to a child. Elise had a neurological condition. Rapid, degenerative, with no clear cure. It wasn't cancer. It wasn't something people rallied around with pink ribbons and fundraising walks. It was quiet. Slow. Cruel. A disease that would steal her from me, piece by piece. Elise sat there calm, nodding, listening. I was the one who broke. I asked 100 questions. What do we do? How much time do we have? What will she lose first? The doctor answered gently, but the words blurred together in my head. All I heard was the countdown had begun. That night, back at the lake house, we didn't say much. We sat on the porch as the sky turned orange over the water. Elise held my hand and whispered, "Let's not waste a second." And we didn't. We squeezed the life out of every single day we had left. She made a list, places she wanted to visit, recipes she wanted to teach me, letters she wanted to write. We made new memories knowing they have to last me a lifetime. I became her caretaker, not because I had to, but because there was nowhere else I wanted to be. I fed her, bathed her, read to her when her eyes were tired. I held her when the fear crept in and she couldn't find the words anymore. They were hard days. So many hard days. But even in the pain, she was still Elise, still strong, still kind, still finding ways to make me laugh. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with this far-off look, and she'd say, "Promise me something. When I'm not here anymore, don't stay stuck." And I'd nod. Because lying felt easier than imagining that world. But deep down, I already knew. When she left, the light would go with her. Elise never wanted to be seen as fragile. Even as her body weakened, even as the disease chipped away at her independence, she carried herself with grace, like a woman determined to protect the dignity of her story. She refused pity. She refused dramatics. She didn't cry in front of anyone but me. There were days when she couldn't lift a fork, when she needed help getting from one room to another, but she'd still find ways to smile, to ask how I was doing, to crack a sarcastic joke about my terrible cooking. I once found her sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the wind ripple across the lake. She whispered, "Isn't it beautiful how the water keeps moving? Even when everything else stands still?" That was Elise. She found poetry in the quiet. Strength in the ordinary. As the months passed, the disease took more, her balance, her memory, her voice. And still, she fought. Not with fists or fury, but with presence. With intention. With a kind of bravery that didn't need to be loud to be felt. One morning, I walked into the living room to find her writing, slowly, painfully, in a small leather-bound journal. She had begun writing letters. To me. To her family. To the nieces and nephews she knew she wouldn't get to see grow up. Each word was a goodbye wrapped in love. No bitterness. No blame. Just gratitude and grace. I asked her once if she was afraid. She nodded slowly. Then whispered, "Not of dying. Just of being forgotten." I promised her she wouldn't be. Not by me. Not by anyone whose life she touched. Near the end, the lake house became her whole world. We moved the bed near the big window so she could see the water. The sunlight would filter in during the mornings, and sometimes I'd catch her reaching for it, as if trying to hold one last piece of the day. Friends visited less often. Family too. Maybe it was hard for them to see her like that, thin, quiet, fading. I didn't blame them. But I was there. Every hour. Every night. One evening, I played her favorite song, the one we danced to on our wedding night. Her eyes were closed. Her hands trembled. But for one brief moment, she smiled. And I swear I saw her lips move to the rhythm. That was the last time. She passed just before sunrise. Peacefully. Quietly. Just like she lived. And in that moment, the world lost more than a woman. It lost warmth. It lost gentleness. It lost the soft heartbeat of a home built on love. They say grief is loud. But that's not how I remember it. The day after Elise died, the house was filled with people, casseroles in foil trays, condolences whispered in hushed tones, awkward hugs that lingered too long. Everyone said the same things. "She was so special. She's in a better place now. Let us know if you need anything." And then, just like that, they left. The casseroles went cold. The phone stopped ringing. The world moved on. But I stayed. In the lake house. Alone. The bed still smelled like her. Her slippers were still beside the dresser, where she left them the night before her final breath. The toothbrush, the half-used lotion, the cardigan draped over the back of the couch, everything waited for her, like she might walk in any second. But she never did. I remember waking up the next morning to silence so thick, it pressed on my chest. No soft footsteps down the hallway. No humming in the kitchen. No sound of her spoon tapping the rim of her mug as she stirred her tea. Just quiet. And the wind off the lake. The hardest part wasn't the funeral. It wasn't the sympathy cards or the legal paperwork or even picking out her headstone. It was the little things. Folding laundry and finding one of her old t-shirts. Going to the store and instinctively grabbing her brand of cereal. Reaching for my phone to tell her something, then remembering. She was gone. Some nights I'd sit on the porch and talk to her like she was still there. Tell her about the sunset, about a bird I saw, about how strange the world felt without her in it. I didn't care if it made me look crazy. It was the only way I knew how to survive. And in all of that silence, one truth echoed louder than anything. She was the sound in my life. Her laughter, her footsteps, her heartbeat next to mine at night. Without her, the world felt flat. Empty. Like a song with all the melody ripped out. I didn't know it then, but grief had only just begun. Because sometimes, the real pain doesn't come when they leave. It comes in the days after, when you realize they're not coming back. Ever. I almost skipped Christmas that year. Elise loved the holidays. She'd start playing carols in early November, much to my dismay. She'd fill the lake house with cinnamon-scented candles, string lights around every railing, and bake enough cookies to feed a small village. She made Christmas magic, not through gifts or decorations, but with warmth. With togetherness. With love. So when December came, the thought of celebrating without her felt hollow. But her family insisted. "Come to the lake house," they said. "We'll keep her traditions alive." I hesitated. But part of me, the part still clinging to anything that felt like her, agreed. I arrived a day before Christmas Eve. The house was decorated just like she used to do it, maybe even a little more. Someone had clearly tried hard to make it feel like normal. But nothing felt normal. She wasn't in the kitchen humming along to Bing Crosby. She wasn't waiting on the porch with a mug of cider. She wasn't there to squeeze my hand when the kids opened their presents. I watched from the corner of the living room as everyone tried to pretend. The laughter felt a little too loud. The smiles a little too forced. The music didn't sound quite right. And maybe I was imagining it. But I started to notice the distance. Conversations that used to include me now seemed to move past me. I'd say something and get a polite nod, then nothing. There were side glances. Long silences. Private talks behind closed doors. I told myself it was grief. That we were all just hurting in our own way. But it didn't feel like shared grief. It felt like something else. Something colder. On Christmas morning, I found one of Elise's old ornaments tucked at the back of the tree, a little wooden star with our initials carved into it. I held it in my hand and closed my eyes, just trying to feel her again. That was the moment I realized I didn't belong there anymore. The woman who had connected me to all of them, she was gone. And without her, I wasn't sure what I was to them. A guest? A reminder? An obligation? Whatever it wasn't family. That Christmas didn't break me. But it opened the first deep crack, the kind that only gets wider with time. I drove back to the city in silence that night. No music. No calls. Just me. And the growing understanding that some goodbyes don't come all at once. Some come slowly. In glances. In empty chairs. In the way people stop looking you in the eye. It was spring when they came. I hadn't been back to the lake house since Christmas. I couldn't bring myself to return. The walls whispered too many memories. Every room was a photograph I couldn't escape. But something had been nagging at me, overdue property taxes, utility bills piling up, the weeds overtaking the path to the dock. So I drove out one Friday morning with the plan to clean up, maybe stay a night or two. Just enough to keep the place from falling apart. I hadn't been there 20 minutes when I saw them pull into the driveway. Her sister, her brother, and her sister-in-law. No warning. No text. No call. Just there. I opened the door slowly, confused. Smiling, even. "Didn't expect to see you," I said. They didn't smile back. We stood in the living room, the same room where we used to play games, sing songs, unwrap presents. And the air was thick. Heavy with something I couldn't name. They made small talk at first. Asked if I'd been okay. Commented on the weather. But their eyes. They didn't hold warmth. Only distance. And then, without looking at me, her sister said it. "We think it's time you gave the house back." I blinked. "Back? What do you mean, back?" Her brother spoke next. Calm. Cold. "This house was always part of Elise's family. You married in, Jake. But now. She's gone. Gone." I stood there, stunned, not even sure what I was hearing. I looked around, at the walls Elise painted, the furniture we picked out, the photos still hanging of us holding hands on the dock. "I'm not selling the house," I said. They looked at each other. Then came the sentence that broke me. "You're not family anymore." Just like that. Not with anger. Not with emotion. Just a flat declaration, like a decision had already been made. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stared at them. These were the people who once called me their own. Who hugged me, leaned on me, trusted me. Now they stood in our home, treating me like an outsider. Like a placeholder. They weren't there for Elise's worst days. They didn't feed her, bathe her, hold her through the tremors. I did. I was there when her light dimmed. I was the last voice she heard before leaving this world. But none of that mattered to them anymore. All that mattered was the house. And in that moment, I realized they hadn't come to mourn, or reconnect, or even remember her. They had come to claim what they believed still belonged to them. Not the memories. Not the love. Not the heartbreak. Just the house. So I told them they needed to leave. I said it without shouting. Without anger. But with a finality they weren't expecting. And when they did, when the door shut behind them, I sat down on the floor and wept. Not for the house. Not even for Elise. But for the truth I could no longer deny. They never truly saw me. Not as family. Not as hers. Not as anything. After they left the lake house that day, something shifted in me. I didn't just feel grief anymore. I felt watched. Judged. Like every moment I had shared with Elise was suddenly up for debate. The calls stopped. The texts dried up. People who once called me brother now responded to my messages with clipped replies, or not at all. And then came the whispers. It started small, a mutual friend mentioning that Elise's sister was worried about how I was handling things. Someone else hinted that the family thought I was holding on to the house for the wrong reasons. One day, I ran into her cousin at the grocery store. We hadn't seen each other in months. I smiled, reached out to hug her, and she took a step back. She mumbled something about being in a rush and disappeared down the aisle. That night, I lay awake asking myself questions I never imagined I'd have to consider. Had they always felt this way? Were they just tolerating me all along? Was I ever really part of the family, or just Elise's shadow? The worst part was not knowing what was said behind my back. It was feeling it. The way her sister stopped posting old photos of Elise and me. The way her brother unfriended me on social media. The way certain mutual friends began liking comments that hinted I was profiting from her death just by keeping the lake house. I hadn't changed the house. I didn't rent it out. I didn't throw parties. I didn't even invite people over. I kept it exactly the way Elise had left it, like a shrine, a time capsule, a living memory. But in their minds, that made me selfish. Possessive. Maybe even dangerous. And yet, none of them ever spoke to me directly. No one had the decency to ask me how I was sleeping at night, what it was like to wake up to an empty pillow, or how it felt to walk into the bathroom and still see her robe hanging on the hook. Instead, they whispered. Behind closed doors. While I sat alone, holding on to the last piece of her I had left. It was a new kind of grief. Not just the loss of Elise, but the loss of everyone who came with her. And still, I held on. Because letting go of that house felt like erasing the only place in the world where she still existed. But part of me knew. A storm was coming. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no slammed doors, no ultimatums, no breakdowns. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, with the late afternoon sun spilling through the kitchen window, lighting up the dust that danced in the still air like little ghosts. I had come to the lake house to fix a leaky faucet. That's all. Just fix the faucet and leave. But when I walked through the door, something felt different. The silence didn't comfort me anymore. It pressed down on me. Like the house itself had grown tired of waiting for a voice that would never return. I stood in the living room for a long time, looking at the photos on the mantel, our wedding day, a canoe ride on the lake, Elise laughing so hard her eyes were nearly closed. I realized I hadn't smiled like that since she died. And maybe I never would again, not in this place. This house was filled with love. But it was also filled with pain. Every corner whispered her name. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me of the footsteps that no longer followed mine. Every room carried weight, beautiful, sacred, unbearable weight. And somewhere inside, I heard her voice. Soft, but certain. Don't stay stuck, Jake. She told me that once. Near the end. When she could barely speak. Her hand in mine, her eyes locked on mine. I didn't want to let go of the house because it felt like letting go of her. But that's not what it was. It was letting go of what we had, not of who she was. She didn't live in the walls. She lived in me. So I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed a short email to a local realtor. Just a question. Nothing binding. But enough. Enough to move. Enough to breathe again. That night, I walked out to the dock. The lake was calm. The stars were out. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't ask her to come back. I just said thank you. For the love. For the memories. For the years we had. And when I turned back toward the house, I felt it. A shift. Like the place had just exhaled. Like it knew it was time. Time to let go. Time to go on. I gave myself 1 weekend to do it. 2 days to pack up a decade of memories. 48 hours to say goodbye to the place where my life began, ended, and reshaped itself. I didn't rush. I couldn't. The first box I opened held our Christmas decorations. The ones Elise insisted on using every year, no matter how worn they were. The old wooden snowman she painted herself. The stocking that still had her name stitched in gold thread. I sat on the floor and held it in my lap for a long time, not ready to put it away, not ready to move forward, not sure if I ever would be. In the kitchen, I found her favorite teacup. The one with the tiny chip on the rim that she always insisted gave it character. I almost threw it away. But I wrapped it in newspaper instead and gently placed it in a box marked fragile. Every item had a story. Every drawer, every shelf. Letters I had forgotten she wrote me. A playlist scribbled on a napkin. A recipe card in her handwriting that said, "Don't forget to add more cinnamon, like I do." In the closet, I found a sweatshirt of mine that she always stole. I pulled it over my head and breathed in, hoping, praying, for even the faintest trace of her scent. But it was gone. Just fabric now. The hardest room was the bedroom. The bed where she slept. Where we held each other through storms, through sickness, through sleepless nights. Where I held her for the last time. I stripped the sheets in silence. Folded them slowly. Set them aside. I left the last box for the living room, the heart of the house. The room with the record player, the fireplace, the photos of every summer spent on the lake. One by one, I took the pictures down. Some went with me. Some I let go of. Because not every memory needs to be carried, some are better left where they were made. By sunset, the house was almost empty. But it didn't feel hollow. It felt peaceful. Like it had finished telling its story. I sat on the porch for one last evening. Watched the light fade over the water. Listened to the breeze rustle the trees. Let the silence hold me, not as punishment, but as comfort. Before I stood up, I whispered. "Thank you. For everything. I didn't take everything with me. Just a few boxes, a few keepsakes, and all the parts of her I now carry inside. Because grief doesn't live in places. It lives in us. And so does love." The day the house sold was quiet. No drama. No big moment. Just a signature. A handshake. A small set of brass keys laid gently on a table I no longer owned. I arrived early that morning, before the buyers came. I didn't need to, the papers were already signed. But I wanted one last walkthrough. One last goodbye, on my own terms. The house felt different now. Empty, yes, but not sad. Lighter, somehow. Like it had already accepted this next chapter. I walked from room to room, touching the walls like they were old friends. I whispered a few words into the silence, thank yous, goodbyes, maybe even a quiet apology. In the kitchen, I left a note for the new owners. Just a few lines. This house was filled with love. Take care of it. Let it fill you the way it filled us. I left a photo, too. Just one. Elise, standing barefoot on the dock, her hair wild from the wind, her smile effortless. No caption. No explanation. Just her. When the new owners arrived, a young couple, maybe in their 30s, they were polite, warm, excited. They asked if I had any final tips about the house. I told them where the morning sun hit just right on the porch, how the fire pit crackled loudest after the first rain, how the lake was calmest at sunrise. I didn't tell them everything. I didn't tell them about the late-night dances. Or the goodbye letters. Or how the bedroom window holds the last breath of a woman who meant everything to me. Some things don't belong to new owners. Some things stay with the people who lived them. When they reached out to take the keys, I hesitated. Just for a second. My fingers curled around the metal, not from resistance, but reverence. Because this wasn't just handing over property. This was the final moment. The closing of a sacred chapter. And then, I let go. I walked away without looking back. Not because I didn't care. But because I knew if I did, even for a second, I might never leave. The keys were no longer mine. But the memories? Those will always be. People often ask me if I regret it. Selling the house. Letting go. Walking away from what was once the happiest place in my life. The truth is, I don't. Because I didn't walk away from Elise. I walked toward healing. I walked toward peace. That house was never just about the walls, the view, or the traditions. It was about her. And she doesn't live in a place anymore, she lives in me. I used to think family was permanent. Unshakable. Defined by blood and bonds and holiday dinners. But I've learned that family can shift. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes it betrays you. And sometimes it disappears when the person who held it all together is no longer there. But love, real love, that doesn't vanish. It doesn't fade with time or distance. It roots itself deep inside you, in the quiet spaces, in the way you carry someone's spirit forward. Letting go of that house didn't mean I let go of Elise. It meant I honored her wishes. It meant I chose to keep moving, even if it hurt. Because that's what love does. It stays. But it also sets you free. So if you're watching this, and you're holding on to something, a place, a person, a version of your life that no longer exists, I want you to hear this. You're not alone. And you're allowed to let go. That doesn't make you weak. It means you're still alive. And that's a beautiful, courageous thing. If this story touched you, if it made you remember someone, or feel seen in your own grief, please like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your words might help someone else feel less alone too. And that's what we're here for, isn't it? To remind each other that even after goodbye, life still holds something worth staying for.